A thematic commentary on the Quran by Sheikh Muhammad Al-Ghazali, translated from the Arabic by Ashur A. Shamiz and revised by Zainab Alawi. May Allah bless them all. Surah number 2, Surah Al-Baqarah, the Cow, Part 1. Following the Muslims' immigration from Mecca and their settlement in Medina around 622 AC, all attention was focused on building the first Muslim autonomous community there. By embracing the new religion, members of that community had, each in his or her own right, succeeded in breaking away from idolatry, polytheism, and other forms of pagan traditions and practices of Arabia. They had now found security and safety in their new sanctuary, where they could group together and set up a state of their own. Nevertheless, they were to face fresh hostilities from a rather unexpected source. The Jewish rabbis had always believed that religion was the prerogative of their own people and a monopoly of their chosen race. Predictably, they were somewhat ruffled and unhappy at the arrival in Medina of Prophet Muhammad and his followers preaching Islam. They quickly embarked on preparation for how to react to that threat and for the best way to deal with it. Scheming, overt as well as covert, began. The Hebrew tribes who had settled in Medina, or Yathrib, as it was known then, in the fertile northwestern part of Hijaz, had gone there as refugees to escape the oppression and persecution of the Byzantine, the Eastern Roman Empire, whose capital was Constantinople. Although welcome to live among the illiterate Arab tribes, they rather looked down upon them. The Jews made no effort to combat idol worship, which was widespread in the area, nor did they feel the need to pass on the teachings of their religion to their native hosts. They recognized no obligation to propagate God's message or establish His order to replace the existing man-made one. The views of the Arabs was wholly sanctimonious, adopting the proverbial condescending, holier-than-thou attitude, holding jealously onto their religious heritage, and totally beholden to the erroneous belief that religion was the privilege and theirs alone. What then was their, or more specifically, their elders' reaction to Islam? They rejected it. They began to distort, conceal, and otherwise obliterate religious and historical facts in order to preempt the spread of the new religion. In contrast, Prophet Muhammad, the last of God's prophets and benefactor of the new religion, spared no effort in appealing to them and soliciting their understanding and cooperation. However, their malaise was deep and irrepressible, and increasingly their hostile intentions began to be reflected in their behavior. In view of this, the Muslims found themselves in their new sanctuary, building their community on one hand and defending it on the other. They were laying the foundations of their nation state under the guidance and direction of the divine revelation being received by Muhammad, while at the same time having to ward off the impending threat posed by enemies living in their midst, who were intent on undermining their existence and everything they were building. It was in this atmosphere that Al-Baqarah, the longest and most wide-ranging chapter in the Quran, was received. The Quran obliquely cited the fallacy of Jewish claims of exclusivity by describing the Quran as the book over which there is no doubt a guidance to those who fear. Ayat number 2. Thereby highlighting the view that other books or scriptures were less viable as sources of guidance and law, and less authoritative as references for or expression of the divine will. In over 30 different places, the surah elaborates extensively on the features and merits of the God-fearing category of human beings. This aspect is unique to the surah. Fear, alternatively awareness of God, is a quality required of human beings by all religions. God says in the Quran, "To God belong all that is in the heaven and on the earth. And we have recommended to those who had received the book before you, as we have recommended to you, that you should all fear God." Surah An-Nisa, Ayat 131. The surah is also remarkable for referring to all the 5 principles of the religion of Islam in the following verses. Tawheed. People, worship your Lord who has created you and those before you. Ayat 21. Salah. Observe Salah, especially the middle one, and submit to God. Ayat 238. Zakah. Believers, spend of what we have given you before a day come when there will be no trades and no friendship and no intercession. Ayat 254. Saum. Believers, Saum has been prescribed for you as it had been for your predecessors. Ayat 183. And finally, Hajj. Complete the Hajj and the Umrah for God's sake. Ayat 196. The revelation of the surah was completed over a period, with the Prophet adding verses and passages that related to its subject matter when he was directed to do so through revelation. According to established sources, the last Quranic verses revealed to Muhammad was ayat number 281 of the surah, which says, "Fear the day when you shall return to God, when each soul shall be requited according to its deserts, and none shall be wrong." The Prophet instructed the scribes to include it with the verses dealing with usury, which appear towards the end of the surah. Reading through the early part of the surah, we find that it describes God-fearing people in 3 verses, the believers in 2, and the hypocrites in 13, an indication of the last wickedness and threats they pose to the whole Muslim community. Following a general call for belief in God and the Day of Judgment, and a brief account of the miraculous aspect of the Quran itself, the veracity of Muhammad, his proponent, and the ill fate awaiting his opponent, the surah returns to the description of the various human groups, the believers, the rejectionists, and the renegades, and how each reacted to God's messages. The surah then inquires whether God deserves to be understood and addressed in such an improper and ungrateful manner by the unbelievers and the skeptics who fail to acknowledge His grace and benevolence. It asks them pointedly, how can you deny God when He gave you life after you were dead, and He will cause you again to die and then restore you to life so that you eventually return unto Him? Ayat 28. Having dealt with that subject, it would follow naturally to address the issue of creation and how humans came to be charged with their role in this world, and the perennial confrontation between Adam, father of the human race, and Satan, humankind's archetypal enemy, along with his supporters. This confrontation was reenacted in a bitter conflict between Muhammad, the last of God's prophet to humankind, and some descendants of Israel who that instant choose to take Satan's side in a crucial battle between truth and falsehood. Being the first surah revealed in Medina, it was imperative that it should deal with the issues of the Jews, their elders' negative attitudes towards the message of Islam, and their history, both ancient and recent. This begins in the surah with O children of Israel, remember the favors I have bestowed upon you. Keep your covenant, and I shall keep mine, and fear me. Believe in what I have revealed, confirming that which you had received, the scriptures, and do not be the first to deny it. Ayat 40 and Ayat 41, Surah Al-Baqarah. The confirmation in the Quran of the scriptures of which the Jews had possession was a confirmation in general terms and not in all details. The people of the book, Jews and Christians, were seen as different from other religious groups because they believe in the one and only God. Unlike the idolaters and the pagans, they did not deny the existence of God and divine revelation. The Quran endorsed the claim of the Jews with regard to their belief in the one God, revelation, and the responsibility and accountability of humankind. But it did not endorse, among other things, the allegation in the scriptures that God regretted bringing about the great flood or his needing to be reminded not to do so again. Likewise, the Quran does not endorse the Old Testament tale of God walking on earth, leaning towards Abraham and eating with him. Nor does it accept the story of God's wrestling with Jacob's one long night and not being released until he promised Jacob the name Israel. The Quran's endorsement of the Jewish scriptural legacy was general and not specific nor total. Furthermore, the Quran cites those parts of Jewish scriptures it endorses mainly to hold their elders accountable for their faithfulness to and respect for those scriptures and their teachings. All in all, the surah cites 16 different issues concerning Jewish descent, all through the people's long and checkered history as documented in the Torah. In all these cases, the dissenters proved disappointing even to their own prophets, and wanting their observance of God's commands and their gratitude to and reverence for him. The account begins with the verse, "Remember how we delivered you from Pharaoh's people, who had inflicted upon you the worst type of torture." Ayat 49. Did the rebellious among the Jews appreciate that favor? Although God went on to drown their enemies before their eyes, did they recognize God's justice or acknowledge his grace as he destroyed their oppressors? These issues are debated over several passages, always inquiring whether the Jewish conscience has been aroused or the Jewish faith in God rekindled. Would the Jews of Arabia, after such a detailed interrogation and analysis of their ancestors' record, persist with their obduracy and rejection of Prophet Muhammad, to whom the Quran was being revealed? The outcome of this discussion of the long history of the Jews is an assertion of the veracity and efficacy of the concept of religious unity as expounded in the Quran. Subhanallah, walhamdulillah, wa la ilaha illallah, wallahu akbar, wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim, wa la hawla wa la quwwata illa billahi al-aliyyil azim.